The sky above Juriel 7 was a perpetual bruise, violet clouds roiling over a barren wasteland scarred by old wars and mining blasts. Lieutenant Ava Kessler stood on the makeshift wall of Outpost Rorke, eyes narrowed against the wind-blown dust that smelled faintly of rust and ozone. The land stretched out in silence, and that silence gnawed at her. Nothing about this planet was friendly. Not the air, not the terrain, and especially not what lay beneath it. Still, this outpost had stood for nearly 6 years. Unremarkable, mostly forgotten, and exactly where the Threx would least expect a human presence to matter. Kessler flexed her gloved fingers on the edge of the guardrail, her helmet tucked under her arm. A relic of the old colonial wars, the outpost's wall was cobbled together from armor plating and composite salvage, more symbolic than functional. "Another day in paradise," she muttered, voice dry. Below, Chief Engineer Jenna Voss knelt beside a sputtering sensor unit. Her short, platinum-dyed hair peeked out from under her cap as she cursed at the circuitry. Sparks flared. She jerked her hand back and stood up, shaking her fingers. "This junk's 2 decades obsolete, Lieutenant. I've got coffee makers with better targeting range." "Fix it anyway," Kessler replied without glancing down. "Just need it to blink when something tries to eat us." "I'm an engineer, not a medium," Jenna shot back, wiping grime on her jumpsuit. "If the Threx do come knocking, we're going to need more than blinking lights." Dr. Malik Okoro arrived, his long white coat fluttering behind him like a misplaced flag. He moved with the gait of someone used to emergency triage but always hoping to avoid it. His medical bag clinked softly with every step. "I heard a rumor about blinking lights and death by insectoid. Should I start prepping triage now, or wait until you smell burning?" Kessler offered a thin smile. "Don't worry. If we go down, we'll be too vaporized for triage." Malik's brow furrowed. "That's not comforting. That's war," she said flatly. In truth, none of them belonged here. Ava had once commanded a company on Caldera Prime before politics and losses sent her spiraling to this backwater post. Jenna had been an engineer for the orbital freight lines until she'd sabotaged a corrupt contractor's ship for safety violations, technically heroic, definitely illegal. And Malik, despite his brilliance, had been exiled by the Alliance Medical Board for refusing to allow AI-assisted euthanasia protocols. Rorke's Drift wasn't just a forgotten outpost. It was a haven for those the galaxy wanted to forget. The alarm triggered at 1703 Standard. Not a blaring siren, just a quiet red pulse along the interior lights. Ava snapped her helmet on as Jenna checked the comms feed. "Proximity tripwire, Sector 5. No IFF signature. Signal strength low but steady. Could be a rock slide." "Could be scouts," Ava replied. They moved fast. Within 5 minutes, every member of the 26-person crew was accounted for and armed. Most weren't soldiers. Some had never fired a weapon in real conditions. They were mechanics, medtechs, and system analysts. But they were humans, and Ava knew that counted for something. The outpost's drone rig launched overhead, a skeletal machine with patched armor and one working plasma rail. Jenna piloted it from the ops desk, her eyes scanning feeds. Malik converted the mess hall into a medical bay, spreading out supplies with surgical precision. Night fell quickly on Juriel 7. When the stars blinked into view, the team spotted the shapes on the horizon, moving slowly, too slow for vehicles, too coordinated for local fauna. Ava lifted her rifle, adjusted the scope. The Threx didn't march. They swarmed. She counted at least 50 before losing track in the darkness. A low hum buzzed through the ground. "They're testing us," Ava said quietly. "They don't know if we're worth it." "Do we want to be?" Malik asked. "We're here. That's enough." Jenna glanced up from her station. "If we survive, I'm demanding hazard pay." Ava exhaled and tapped her comm. "All teams, lock down positions. Power rerouted to defense grid. No one fires unless ordered or attacked. We hold. As the hum grew louder and the outpost's lights flickered, Ava felt the full weight of what was coming. They were outnumbered, underarmed, and utterly alone. But she also knew that humanity had a reputation for doing the impossible when pushed to the brink. And whatever the Threx thought they were about to overrun, they would soon learn the name Rorke's Drift all over again. A single shape broke from the shadows, sprinting toward the wall on all 6 limbs, eyes glowing like molten metal. The silence shattered as Jenna activated the drone's railgun. A flash of white, the smell of scorched air, and the thing dropped 10 meters from the barrier, twitching. Ava's voice cut through the comms. "They're coming! Everyone ready yourselves! This is not the end!" It wasn't. It was only the beginning. The first wave came just after midnight. The perimeter sensors barely had time to register the breach before the outpost shook with the impact of Threx shock troops slamming into the western barricade. The structure groaned, jury-rigged steel plates straining against the momentum of massed alien limbs. Red emergency lights cast long shadows through the corridors as Ava Kessler sprinted up the internal stairs, her boots clanging a rhythm of urgency. She barked into her comm, issuing orders with sharp precision. Sector West, suppressive fire only, conserve munitions, central ops, status on drone control. "Alive for now!" Jenna Voss yelled from behind the console. Sparks danced from the terminal as she furiously typed, coaxing every line of cracked code to obey. The drone grid was holding, barely. The machine above the wall spat plasma in controlled bursts, searing holes into the approaching tide of Threx warriors. The creatures moved like a nightmare, a wave of segmented armor, serrated limbs, and terrible coordination that shouldn't have been possible in such numbers. Ava reached the battlement, crouched beside Corporal Tan, one of her few trained soldiers. He was bleeding from a shallow wound across his brow, but his aim held steady. "They're testing weak points," Ava said, watching the shifting mass below. "Flanking maneuvers, left and right." Tan nodded, grim. "Like they know we're not worth the full assault yet. We'll convince them otherwise." In the medbay, Malik Okoro gritted his teeth as he stapled a deep gash on a technician's leg. The young woman, barely out of academy, bit down on a strip of ration wrapper, sweat streaming down her face. Malik worked methodically, hands slick with antiseptic. There was no time for anesthetics. He'd treated soldiers before, but this was different. These were colleagues, civilians. He looked up as the floor vibrated again from a distant explosion. The blast came from the southern quarter, a Threx breach, where the mining tunnels under the outpost created vulnerabilities. Ava knew the risk. She activated her comm again. "Voss, redirect drone coverage to southern tunnel axis." "On it!" Jenna was already anticipating the move. She routed the last of the auxiliary power to support defensive grid extensions, an improvised firewall of arc energy. The moment it activated, a column of blue light surged along the ground just as 3 Threx scouts attempted infiltration. The creatures screeched in discordant metallic tones before bursting into flames. "Ingenious," Ava muttered. "Terrifying," Jenna replied. "Don't ask me to do it again unless you want the life support system to have a nervous breakdown." Back at the wall, the Threx shifted strategy. As the drone fire pinned down the frontline attackers, heavier units appeared behind. Lumbering monstrosities carrying strange organic artillery. One launched a biochemical projectile that struck near the gate, splattering corrosive fluid that hissed on contact with alloy. The gate groaned. Ava ducked back as shrapnel sprayed past her cheek. "They've brought a spitter! Target it!" Tan locked in. His rifle's scope glinted red as he fired a plasma burst directly at the creature's swollen gland. The resulting explosion lit the night like a second sun, but it cost them. The gate's locking mechanism shorted out in the shockwave. Jenna cursed. "We're losing integrity. If they breach the gate, they won't," Ava said. She tapped into all channels. Prepare fallback to the inner compound. Use Breach Protocol 7. Set charges at the gate. Within minutes, the outer defenses were rigged with explosives. The team fell back in formation, covering each other with controlled bursts. Even Malik, who had never held a rifle with conviction, stood watch beside the entrance to the medbay, his fingers trembling but resolute. He wasn't a soldier. He had taken an oath. But tonight, survival meant standing his ground. The threats surged. The charges blew. The night shattered. Metal, flesh, and fire collided in a thunderous roar that echoed across the canyon. Dust clouded the stars. When it cleared, a smoking heap marked what was once the front gate. The attackers were repelled, for now. Inside the compound, silence returned like an intruder unsure it was welcome. Ava took a slow breath, surveying the aftermath. Dead Threk's bodies littered the perimeter, mingled with the remains of a few brave defenders. She counted each one. She knew every name. Malik approached, his coat now soaked with more blood than medicine. 6 injured, 3 serious. I can keep them stable, but we're running low on synth meds. We'll make do, Ava said. Jenna arrived next, sweat streaking her face. That firewall trick? Last trick in the bag. Our drone's down to 20% energy. I rerouted everything non-essential to the defense grid. How long can we hold? Ava asked. Jenna hesitated. Another wave? Maybe a few hours? 2? Tops? Ava nodded. That'll be enough. She stepped away, allowing herself a moment on the inner wall. The sky above was still dark, but somewhere beyond it was Earth and the Alliance, and all the bureaucracy that had thrown them here like forgotten refuse. And yet, this outpost, this broken, unwanted place, had become something more. A line drawn in the sand. She tapped the edge of her helmet, activating a short-range broadcast. To all hands, we held them back tonight. Not because we were stronger, not because we had the better tech, but because we refused to break. You made them bleed, and we'll make them bleed again. The comms clicked off. The night stretched out, silent again, but it was no longer empty. It was waiting. The defenders of Rorke's Drift stood ready. Somewhere in the alien dark, the Threks recalculated. The dawn came blood-red, diffused through smoke and the shattered remnants of once white sky. Ash drifted in gentle spirals through the outpost like ghostly snow, landing on scorched metal and shattered armor. The last of the Threks had fallen 3 hours before, but no one believed it was truly over. Ava Kessler stood at the edge of the inner compound, her rifle slung low and a fresh bandage wrapped tightly around her left arm. Her stance was rigid, not from pain, but from the weight of survival. Around her, the remnants of her crew moved like sleepwalkers through the ruins of the night. Each face was drawn tight with exhaustion, but none looked away. They had seen what came in the dark, and they had remained. Jenna Voss sat beneath a half-melted console, her fingers twitching despite the shutdown systems around her. She'd used every reserve, every scrap of code, every spark the outpost had left to hold the line. Now, she stared into the fractured screen like it might still hold secrets. Malik Okoro moved among the wounded with a quiet calm. He'd stabilized the worst of them, using a mix of battlefield medicine and sheer force of will. He had not slept in nearly 40 hours, but his hands remained steady. A static burst snapped through the central communications system. Then a voice crackled, disbelieving. "Outpost Rorke, this is Alliance Patrol Kilo 7. Are you transmitting?" Ava leaned into the mic, voice firm. "This is Commander Ava Kessler. Rorke's Drift is intact. Repeat, we are holding." There was a pause on the line. Then, "Confirmed. We didn't think... Stand by for evac and medical units. They'll be inbound within the hour." The words felt surreal. Relief didn't come in a flood. It arrived slowly, like warmth seeping into frozen limbs. Malik closed his eyes, and let out a breath that sounded like a lifetime escaping. Jenna slumped back, her shoulders shaking with a quiet laugh, or maybe a sob. Ava just stared out over the horizon, where blackened Threx corpses stretched toward the ridge. "They'll come again," she said softly. "Then we'll hold again," Tan replied from behind her, one eye covered with gauze but his grip still firm on the wall's edge. The others gathered, one by one, without orders or prompting, a silent communion of survivors. There had been 26 at the start, 17 remained. The comm crackled once more. "Evac ETA, 58 minutes. In the time that followed, they moved through the outpost like mourners tending sacred ground. Ava oversaw the salvage of what supplies remained. Jenna documented the battle log with exacting detail, while Malik organized the wounded for rapid extraction. No one spoke much, yet everything they did held meaning. There was no ceremony, but it felt like one. By the time the evac shuttles descended through the haze, the defenders stood at attention. Dirty, bruised, bloodied, but unbowed. The first officer down the ramp paused, overwhelmed by the sight. You fought them off?" Ava gave a tired nod. "We endured." The officer looked past her at the destroyed gates, the charred ground, the crumpled husks of Threx war beasts. Then he looked again at the people standing before him. Scientists, engineers, medics, miners, and a handful of soldiers who had led them. "Then maybe this war isn't lost," he murmured. "No," Ava said, "but it's changed." They boarded the shuttles not as evacuees, but as witnesses to something elemental, something earned. As the engines roared to life and the ground fell away beneath them, Rorke's drift shrank into the scarred landscape. It had no grand fortifications, no command towers or artillery emplacements, but it had stood. Ava stared down through the viewport as they ascended. She thought about the message they'd sent the Threx, about what it meant to fight not with superiority, but with sheer, unyielding defiance. And she realized that the battle wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning.